You're listening to the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast, where we do fast, fun, free daily deep dives into books of the Bible. And right now, we're going through Esther.
My buddy Rocky and I play tennis together all the time. I am not a tall man. I am 5'8". On a tall day. Played a lot of sports. I mean, I wouldn't say I'm unathletic. I've been around all the games, all the balls. You hit the ball and you do the thing. I love sports, but I'm no Rocky. He's like 6'5". He's literally a model. That's what he does. He's in advertisements and stuff. There's one where he's in this dreamy advertisement for, what was it? It was like the Bahamas resorts, Atlantis resorts, maybe. It's so cool. He's like wearing the suit and he's underwater and there's like this mermaid and they're down there just being beautiful people. And it's like, you might meet a mermaid at Atlantis resorts. You should go there. I mean, the point is, the guy's just wildly humble. He's super talented. He's super athletic. And so it's kind of an odd matchup with me out there kind of looking like the Penguin and him out there looking like Henry Cavill, Superman, something like that. But we're great pals. We've played tennis together for a long time. My game is that I hit the ball at him real hard. I hit with a lot of topspin. And maybe it's the baseball player in me, but I really like trying to pop the ball and play the game with a lot of pace and to put pressure on my opponents. And it works against most people. But not Rocky, because his game is that he likes to sit back and just play deflective defense until I make a mistake and leave an easy ball, and then he just moves up toward the net and uses his athleticism. He puts it away, and he shames me. We're competitive with each other. I mean, it goes back and forth. I tend to win outside. He tends to win when we play inside. But it's comical because you'd look at the two of us, and you'd be like, well, the guy who would try to stand more in one place and just deflect things, it's going to be that little fella over there with the not so impressive head of hair, and the big athletic dude who just looks like a superhero. I bet he's going to run around and mash the ball, but instead it plays out the way it does. Well, it's really fun, and I've gone on way too long, but whatever. And I like my friend. I like playing tennis with him. And hey, you and I hang out, and sometimes we talk about life before we get to the Bible a little bit. The example's going to pay off in just a minute. The point is, we play this game where we'll hit 20 balls on a point, and it's just me wailing away on the ball and him deflecting it back. And it's just this constant reversal. And I get to this place where in my mind, the whole strategy is how do I anticipate the next reversal, the next reversal, the next reversal. And the whole story of our game, the whole story of our points is based on reversing the energy of one thing back to the other thing. And that's very much how the structure of the story of Esther is built as well. Everything rhymes, everything has a counterpart, and the theme of reversal is all over it. So it doesn't move forward like your typical hero's journey. It has elements of that, but the plot beats and the big thematic beats are all some kind of reversal or echo of things that have already been established. And that is the case also here in Esther chapter 2, after Xerxes has set a royal crown on Esther's head and made her queen instead of Vashti. When we get into the next verses here, we see an echo, we see a reversal, and that is first hinted by the fact that the author of the text reminds us about Vashti. She's been gone for a long time, by the way. I mean, she's been out of the picture. I don't know where she lives now or what she does. It's probably not a good situation for her. But she gets brought up again here to remind the reader of the last time we saw her. Where was that again? Oh, yeah, it was at a banquet where she was meant to be the guest of honor, or maybe dishonor, depending on how you read the context there. And well, the next banquet we see is this one here, and there's going to be a queen again, and she's going to be the centerpiece of it. But this queen is the replacement for the queen who didn't participate in the banquet earlier the right way. So in a way, the narrative has hit a hard ball into play, and now the narrative is going to deflect that ball back into play in another direction. It says, and the king gave a great banquet, Esther's banquet, for all his nobles and officials. He proclaimed a holiday throughout the provinces and distributed gifts with royal liberality. Well, as we've talked about a whole bunch, we know that these banquets, because we already saw one in Esther chapter 1, they seem like they would be a lovely place, and it's all fun and games, and here's the king being super liberal with his generosity, but we also know they're very, very dangerous. A queen got deposed. The 7 noblemen probably descended from the people who helped put Darius, Xerxes' father, on the throne decades earlier. They were all there like vultures, ready to pounce on the opportunity to increase their influence and power and reduce their rivals' influence and power. This could turn ugly very, very fast. And if you remember that, it would cause you to think as the reader, like, hey, I bet this blissful time here at this banquet isn't going to last very long because reversal, 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 reversal. That's just how the game, the tennis point that is the structure of the book of Esther is played. And indeed, in the very next passage, which we're not going to get into much today, we see that danger is lurking just outside the door. Very next verse after all of this takes us into a place where there's a new threat. The king, which is now the security of the heroine of the story, Esther, his life is going to be threatened. Somebody needs to step in and do something because, well, most certainly in an environment like this, the death of the king would be the death or the very bad fate of his queen or queens, which reminds me, we got to talk about that a little bit. As we discussed a little bit earlier, Esther is not mentioned extra biblically, and for that matter, neither is Vashti. Again, that is not problematic for me at all. We're talking about a time in the world, a time in history where you've got 5 or 10 different names for everybody in all of these different languages. Persia was trying to do the thing where it was the empire of all the lands and all the languages. And remember, the edict in chapter 1 that got sent out was in everybody's language. That's a lot of languages. And so in Daniel, you've got multiple names for Daniel. You've got a Babylonian name. You've got a Hebrew name. And we see that as well with Esther, that her Hebrew name is Hadassah, but that she's known in this court. She's known in a Persian context as Esther. Some people link that name to the goddess Ishtar, and there's some really interesting theories that float around with Mordecai maybe being related to the pagan deity Marduk and the name Esther being related to the pagan deity Ishtar. Maybe we'll get into some of those theories later on. They're a bit out there. But what we can say for sure is these characters all have multiple names, and Vashti would have been known by multiple names as well. Another thing I think we can say for sure is that none of these queens correspond with the queen we know about, that being Queen Amestris. Remember, Queen Amestris was the understandably jealous wife of Xerxes, who did not like, according to Herodotus, his weird incestuous dalliances that came on the heels of his defeat in Greece over what would be the last 10, 12, 14 months, as we're at this point in Esther chapter 2. And she set up an elaborate arrangement to go and mutilate her rival for the affections of the king. And it's just an awful, ugly story, the kind of stuff that you get a lot when you go and read ancient history. Well, that doesn't square at all with the timeline of Queen Esther. It doesn't square at all with the nature of Queen Esther. Well, I don't know. Queen Esther's pretty ruthless as we get a little bit further on here toward the people who want to kill her and her people. But the stories, they don't line up neatly. Vashti doesn't correspond with Amestris as well. So presumably, like all of the other kings in the Achaemenid dynasty, Xerxes just had a lot of wives. And that makes sense given that these wives wouldn't have automatic, unfettered, all the time access to the king. It looks like wife or queen would maybe be a tiered system where there might be more than one or even multiple of those queens at any given time. So Esther here then, if we understand it that way, would be tied for the highest female title in the land. However you want to slice it, you got to admit, Xerxes is pretty excited about this big announcement. He is replacing a queen who was unfaithful and did not bring him pleasure, and who did not submit to his expectations, and was not a good example for all of the people of the world. And so this represents the other bookend of his proclamation at the end of the last banquet. Now he's out here saying, this is what it ought to look like. Gentlemen, ladies, Take note of my new wife, my new queen, Esther. She gets it. She understands what the point is. She is a model of wifehood and womanhood that I am proud to put forward and celebrate at great expense as an example to everybody in my empire. So Xerxes would seem to be holding out Esther as something of an anti-Vashti. But as we wrap up for today, that puts her in a difficult position because now all of this hype and hoopla and expenditure has occurred. But remember, Esther has a secret. She's Hadassah. She's Jewish. We don't know the consequences of that secret yet, but it's a vulnerability. She is not ascendant here. She is not one. She is not out of the woods, to speak, and this reality looms in the background of the reader. Verse 19, when the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. So apparently as part of this feast at the end of the whole contest, the losers bracket all got together and were probably formally added to the king's harem so people would know these girls are off limits. They have been with the king and therefore occupy a unique place in society. And so Mordecai is sitting there at the king's gate. We're going to talk more about that specific gate probably next time around. It says, but Esther had kept secret her family background and nationality, just as Mordecai had told her to do, for she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions as she had done when he was bringing her up. Aha! So here at the end of this banquet, there's one little thing we need to take away from this. It is that not only does Esther have access to the king and influence with the king, the greatest of all commodities at this time in history, but by proxy, so does Mordecai. And Esther's loyalty would seem to still be to him. That has some fascinating implications. And we better put a pin in that because, like I was saying a minute ago, this story is a hit and a deflection and a hit and a deflection, just like the tennis points that I play out with my buddy that go on forever. It's all reversals. And so the banquet has now experienced a reversal, but now there's a banquet ball in play. It would be reasonable to expect that the banquet thing is going to come up again. That motif, that theme is going to get deflected back and forth a couple more times. There's more symmetry to be had there. Further, we know this Jewish identity thing is a ball that's in play. That's going to get deflected back and forth and reversed around as well. And Mordecai has access to the king and is paying very close attention to what's going on with Esther as well. That ball's in play and it's going to get bounced around more as well. This story is heating up and we're going to get to the danger I was alluding to a little bit ago next time around. I'm Matt. This is a 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.
This podcast exists because many of you kick in to make it happen, even though you don't have to. Learn more at thetmbh.com/support.